Hello, this is Jeff Kelly, and in this video, I want to talk to you about medical debt. Heart attack, cancer, man, the bills can come in so high. Should you file bankruptcy if something like this has happened to you? And the answer to this question and all legal questions is it depends. So, what does it depend on? Well, number one, if you've only got like one big, huge hospital that's coming after you because you have been through a complete medical catastrophe and the bill is ginormous and huge, should you file bankruptcy over that one bill? And as a general rule, I tell people no. And here's why. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't ever file, but before you do, I think there's some steps you should go through first. If you're dealing directly with a medical institution, I've just found in my 28 years of doing this, as a general rule, they're willing to work with you. Now, you may have to give them copies of your paycheck stubs. You may have to show them proof of what you make before they cut you a deal. But these large hospital institutions in our area, in Northwest Georgia, and honestly, in the metro Atlanta area as well, I have found them to be fairly reasonable to work with. I would definitely at least try before you pull the trigger on bankruptcy. When you call my office, honesty is a core value in my law firm. If this isn't a good idea for you, if there's a way to avoid it, we're going to tell you. And now you can always file down the road if they're not reasonable and they don't give you a good deal, but they know that, and so they know that if you make minimum wage and your medical bill is $500,000, they know they're not going to collect $500,000 from you, and that's why I think they, as a general rule, are pretty reasonable to get something rather than nothing. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to bury your head in the sand and just ignore a big, huge hospital that's trying to collect money from you. I totally get it. It's a human response. Don't feel bad if you've ever done that. But let me tell you what happens if you go that route. If you ignore them, then they're going to sell the debt to a debt collector. And they typically sell it for, I don't know, 5 cents on the dollar. It's not a lot. And the way that debt collector makes money is they collect 100 cents on the dollar from you. Very profitable business for the debt collector. They won't negotiate with you, most likely. It's a numbers game. They're going to try to collect as much as they can and squeeze you for as much as they can. They don't care about your um, what it takes for you to live, because that's not how that business works. It's just a numbers game. Don't take it. I know it's hard not to take it personally, but it's really not personal. It's just all about the numbers for those guys. So, um, what do you do when you have multiple medical agencies coming after you? That might be a time to pull the trigger and file either a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13 and eliminate the medical debt. Medical debt is unsecured debt. It can be wiped out in a Chapter 7. Why on earth would somebody file a 13 to get rid of medical debt if they could qualify for a Chapter 7? And the answer is maybe we're trying to protect something like a house, or maybe we're behind on payments on a car. And in a Chapter 13, you can catch up payments on your house and you can catch up on payments on your car. And you can still get any debt we can get rid of in a 7, we can get rid of in a 13 as well. Now, let me focus on tricky situations. If you've got a lot of equity in your house, currently, I'm making this video here in May 2026. The most I can exempt for your house is $43,000. But there's good news. As of July 1st, that for a married couple, that amount's going to jump from 43,000 on the house to 100,000. For an individual, right now it's 21,500. It's jumping up to 50,000 in starting July 1st. So, what do you do if you've got a house and you just got tons and tons of equity? Maybe you inherited it from somebody, or maybe you've worked your whole life and your house is virtually paid for and you have a ton of equity in your house. And now you have huge medical bills hanging over your head. Ah, um, we're happy to take a look at it for you and crunch some numbers. And I would definitely encourage you to do that if you feel like you're in that situation. You always want to know what your options are. But honestly, if it looks like there's just this ridiculous high amount of equity that we're not going to be able to pay in a Chapter 13 plan, that's where you're really kind of throwing yourself on the mercy of whatever financial and whatever hospital you're dealing with, or debt collector. What they will do is, if you don't pay them, how do they turn medical debt into secured debt? And here's how they do it. They file a lawsuit against you, and you have 30 days to respond, and then they have to get a judgment against you, and they will record something called a FIFA, which will basically take that judgment and attach it to your house. And a lot of people say, well, there's no way they can do that in Georgia. Yes, they can. Welcome to the state of Georgia. They absolutely can do that. So you don't want to ignore the problem, because if they do get a lien that attaches to any equity in your house, it's going to grow every single year with interest while it's not paid. Now, again, every case is different. Chapter 13 and Chapter 7s are not commodities. It's different on every case. Everybody's got a different set of facts. Just because your neighbor down the street got to file in a Chapter 7 and they got to keep their house, but now if you're going to file, there's a risk you may lose it if you don't make X amount of payment. The difference is, how much do you owe on your house and how much is it worth? If your neighbor down the street owes a ton of money and has no equity, they have no problem filing a Chapter 7 and wiping out all of their debts. And you may not be able to. It depends on the situation. That's why it's so important to get legal analysis from an attorney, and let's, examine the situation and find out what's a good option and what's not. Now, I want to switch gears here and I want to talk about medical debt. And there's a lot of myths around that is the number one leading cause of bankruptcy. And, they've done studies on it. And of course, they show, loss of income is number one, and relating to medical debt is number two. So, relating to medical debt, it's a gray area because there's so many factors that are involved here. um, I generally don't see people who come to me with nothing but medical debt file bankruptcy. I've been doing this for 28 years. It's a complex, multi-factor kind of thing. Like and it's very hard to nail something down in a survey and to try to quantify this. But let me give you an example of some types of situations that I have seen. Yes, of course, I have seen people who have had heart attacks and had cancer. And yes, they had a good chunk of medical bills. Did the medical bills all by themselves force them to file a Chapter 13 or Chapter 7? No, it's also loss of income. Because, I mean, think about it. When you have a heart attack or you're going through cancer treatment, you got to miss a lot of work. And sometimes when people come back from these types of situations, they can't work the same job. They have to take less income. And so a lot of people want to blame it on our healthcare system, and it's not just our healthcare systems or lack thereof fault. It's a multitude of things. So how can people avoid this? Well, of course, number one, make sure you're keeping your health insurance as good as you can by the most you can afford. But another thing that people don't usually take into consideration is short-term and long-term disability insurance. And when you are young, it's not that expensive to get policies that you can carry with you your whole life. But if you mess around and wait until you're like me and in your 50s, you would pay a lot of money to start a brand new short term or long term disability insurance policy. So it's super important that you have a plan to cover that gap. But another thing that's never going to show up in these types of situations where somebody does have a health crisis, oftentimes there's another complicating factor called divorce. And it's sad to say, it's sad to see, but a lot of times when the tough times get going, people are gone and they bail out on their spouse when they're going through a tough medical period. That's not the healthcare system's fault. That's not the hospital's fault. And then, when the spouse leaves, they have half the income in a best case scenario. And another thing that I see that's very common in this country, and this is not to condemn anybody, I get it, but most people live paycheck to paycheck. That is a fact. And the only way you are going to be able to survive a health insurance crisis and not file bankruptcy is if, number one, you've got good insurance. Short-term insurance, health insurance, long-term disability. Those are bonuses, big, huge bonuses that could get you through. But you also need savings, like every single month. Every little bit counts. I mean, if you're saving 5%, good for you. If you're saving none, like every single month, you spend every dime that's coming in, it's going out the door. I've raised 4 kids. I know what it's like. Kids cost money. It's life. I get it. But um, if you're in that situation, it's pretty much guaranteed that at some point in your life, there's going to be a healthcare crisis. It's predictable. It's part of life. Not fun. Hope it doesn't happen to you, but when it does, you got to be ready. And if you have zero savings, um, that's going to be a problem. So you don't want to live your life paying interest on credit card debt. You don't want to live your life being a slave to debt. If you have any questions at all about what types of debt can be eliminated in bankruptcy and what types cannot, um, check out my website, www.kellycanhelp.com. And one last thing I'll leave you with, definitely always make your house a priority. You want to make sure you're making that house payment. If you're caught in a tight and you've had a healthcare crisis and you're trying to juggle, which one do I pay, which one not? House comes first. Got to stay current on taxes. Don't shortcut on the income taxes. A lot of people will cut their exemptions to zero. That is a very bad move. Don't do that. The IRS is the worst creditor on planet Earth. Don't get in trouble with them. Make your car payment. And then what's left goes toward everybody else. Again, call my office if you have any questions. Check out my YouTube channel, at Kelly Can Help. We've got a lot of videos on Chapter 13 and Chapter 7. And I thank you so much for tuning in. Have a good one.